Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals, chapters 6 to 7, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 6. Plato had set up a meeting with Bian Lam. It had been short and to the point. He gave her the details of the hangar where they would depart. He informed her that they would have personnel waiting to load her cargo. Plato also dictated that the time of their departure would be 0300 hours. This was non-negotiable, much to Bian's annoyance. If she knew the truth, that rather than just leaving they were fleeing town, it might frighten their meal ticket. The Jade Palace was the jewel of brothels in Hanoi, a glittering display of lights that glowed like a beacon on the waterfront. During the late 60s, early 70s, that's exactly what it was. A beacon for young U.S. soldiers looking to unwind from the horrors of war. Unlike other brothels, the Jade Palace had survived since then, because during the American War, they had been very useful in extracting information about enemy movements from the loose lips of lovesick GIs. This information had been used to deadly effect by the Wraith, who relished using their passion against them. Since the war ended, the brothel had continued to thrive due to the reviving international economy. Luther and Plato had been racing against time to organize their planned heist. So far, they had managed to pull together all the tools required for the job, all but one thing, or indeed, one person. D, in Vietnamese, his name meant royalty, and he certainly was a prince among thieves, which was one reason why Plato had chosen him. The other reason was that he was Chi's brother, so now he had a debt of honor to settle. But he was late, and at this hour Plato had no way of getting word to him. They knew that with the previous night's altercation with the Viper and the Wraith, time was not on their side, and that if they were going to retrieve Tan Vien, it would have to be that night. Luther had been able to get the blueprints of the Jade Palace from a grizzled old man called Hai, who had been happy to part with them for two reasons. One, he badly needed the money to pay off gambling debts, and two, he wanted revenge. Hai had been sacked as the handyman of the Jade Palace 2 weeks earlier and evicted from the premises after it was found out that he had been stealing items of clothing from the young girls who worked there. After purchasing the blueprint, Luther had told Hai to leave town and never return because one way or another, word was going to get out about the old man's betrayal. This news hadn't even occurred to Hai, who turned gray with the realization and fled, though only after downing his drink. They were all but ready now, except for the prince. Plato was waiting in a small noodle shop across the road, eating a soup dish with a chicken foot sitting within it. He was getting antsy. So too was Luther, who was in position on the rooftop of the adjoining building, a factory that made flip-flops. Unlike Plato, Luther was making his frustration known over the headsets that linked the two men. Plato. Plato, Luther growled. I can hear you. Plato sighed as he took a sip of his chicken foot soup. Where the hell is the prince? He's bloody late. You know it's too late to organize anyone else for this mission. And I'd rather not have to blow up half the building trying to get Tan Vien. Luther muttered angrily. Relax, big guy. I'm sure His Highness will turn up. Plato said, trying to sound confident, although the lateness of the hour had started to suggest otherwise. Plato was about to take another sip when a voice next to him spoke up. I said that I'd be here, and I'm a man of my word, the prince said softly. Plato tried to conceal his surprise at the unexpected arrival of the master thief. Not to mention there's a matter of honor at stake as well. The prince was the complete opposite of his late brother Chi, who had a reputation as a fighter. Day, on the other hand, was pale and slight. Plato knew the man's reputation well as a thief, but knew that he would be useless if they had to depend upon him if it went wrong. He didn't doubt the conviction in Day's eyes as he spoke of family honor. Is that him? Is he finally there? You tell that second-rate pickpocket thanks for finally turning up. Luther growled over the comm set. Luther says hi, Plato told Day with a grin. Right. I know I'm late, but you're going to be over the moon with the information I was able to get in regards to finding the safe, the prince said. And for the first time that night, Plato actually believed that they might just pull this off. Chapter 7. With De there, all the pieces were now in place. Plato just had to give the word, and there would be no turning back. He paused. This was a huge predicament he was putting them all in. And for what? Some fabled statue surrounded in mysticism and legend. Not that he believed all that mumbo-jumbo, but the fact that the Viper and the Wraith wanted it so badly intrigued him. No, it was more than that. Ever since he had heard about the European gentleman with the wolf tattoo, finding the statue had become a burning obsession. He hadn't even told Luther about his reasons. Plato. Luther's voice came in through the comms set, rousing Plato from his thoughts. What's on your mind, big fella? Plato asked, even though he knew the answer. Was just wondering if everything was cool, Luther asked. Frosty, just making sure that I've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's. Are you sure you want to do this? Plato asked. You're damn right I do, Luther fired back immediately. Relax, big guy. This isn't exactly a little snatch and grab. The people involved are about the deadliest and most well-connected in the Pacific Rim. Once we do this, we become marked men, Plato said, matter-of-factly. It's because of those people that I want to do this. Getting the statue is just a bonus. I've got a score to settle, Luther said darkly. Okay. Forget I said anything, Plato said, then thought to himself, who wants to live forever anyway? Then whispered into the comms set, Peking duck. Plato had organized for 5 car accidents to occur simultaneously, each one with the purpose of creating a traffic hell, in particular, limiting police presence at the Jade Palace. In less than a minute, 5 different people had radioed in with the catchphrase, Lobster Bisque. This was to notify Plato and his team that they had completed their allocated job. Haggis, Luther's voice breathed over the radio. This told Plato that the phone line had been cut. He now knew that in 30 seconds the power would also be cut, and both he and Dee would have to be in the Jade Palace, courtesy of a delivery entrance in the back alley. As they waited for the power to go, Day was working on the numerous door locks that they had in place. Plato crouched near a line of rubbish bins covering their presence from prying eyes. Both men were tense, but being the professionals that they were, they remained focused on the job at hand. The lights went out at the same time that Day whispered that he was done. Plato nodded and moved with sure-footed speed. Keeping a low profile, he edged past Dee and advanced through the door. Day had memorized the layout of the brothel. Now, moving behind the ex-SAS trooper, Dee whispered which way to turn, both of them moving through the dark corridors like ghosts in the night. Ever since the American presence ended in 1973, the people in Hanoi had been working hard to try and return things to a semblance of normality. But the war had inflicted major damage to nearly all infrastructure, and things like blackouts were as common as death and taxes. So when Luther had cut the power to the Jade Palace, the workers and customers barely even flinched at the inconvenience. To both parties, time was money. Plato moved towards the first set of stairs and noticed a rather large-looking individual standing guard. Day had been able to amass an amazing amount of information, everything from who was working to where they would be at this time. The Madame Cook, who was nothing if not precise in the way that she ran her business, counted on the fact that all of her employees knew better than to fail to follow orders. This fastidiousness was going to work against her tonight. Plato moved up stealthily behind the large goon, and in one move cracked him on the back of the head with the butt of his suppressed SMG and caught him before he hit the ground. Day had already opened a closet, and the pair stuffed the unconscious man away. 1 down, 10 more to go, Plato thought. He moved towards the stairs, weapon raised as he scanned the area before him. As soon as the power had been cut, Luther had silently been moving from the other end of the palace. Using a wide plank, the ex-marine quickly made his way onto the roof of the Jade Palace and entered through a small, locked manhole with the help of bolt cutters. Luther was armed with a pump-action shotgun and twin Browning pistols that he wore slung on his hips like a cowboy. He knew the mission was to get Tanvian, but if either the Viper or Wraith got in his way, he was going to make them sorry. They'd ever crossed Luther Macbeth's path. Luther's night vision was perfect. He'd honed his skills as a tunnel rat during his first tour of duty. Both his fearlessness and his cunning had pulled him through many a skirmish in which others had perished. Now, as he moved along the darkened corridor of the brothel, he figured this situation would be a breeze in comparison. Just then, a door in front of him opened and a slightly overweight man stepped out, dressed only in his birthday suit. "I need fresh towels, boy," the naked man demanded. Luther smiled and punched the man in the jaw. The speed and power of the punch knocked the man out. He hit the wall and slumped to the ground. "Nobody calls me boy," Luther muttered as he moved past the unconscious man. "I hope your wife finds out about this," Luther added, spotting a gold wedding band on the man's ring finger. As Luther was taking care of business, Plato had cleared another corridor, taking out 2 more local security personnel. Dew, who had been his shadow the entire time, was impressed with how Plato conducted himself. This foreigner had a very good reputation with locals who were famous for their loathing of outsiders. Both Luther and Plato had become ingrained within Dew's community, as people who actually cared about them. In a land where others were continually coming in to take advantage of the Vietnamese people, they were genuine in their intentions. Now, with their help, Dew was hoping for retribution for the death of his brother and the collapse of his community. Despite their seamless progress, Plato was growing concerned. Nothing ever went to plan this easily, he thought, and he voiced this over the comm set. "Hey, brother, don't jinx us. We planned well is all. Nothing is going to go wrong," Luther said. "Famous last words," Plato muttered back. So far, no alarms had been raised, and only minimal resistance had been met. The reputation of those who owned the palace was such that no one in their right mind would dare to perpetrate an assault on their property, lest they forfeit their lives. Plato and Day met Luther on the 3rd floor, which was where Madame Cook resided. "Glad you could make it, big fella," Plato said in a low voice, a lopsided grin on his face. "You too, brother." "D, always a pleasure," Luther replied. "Ah, I'm glad to see that you're over my tardiness," D said condescendingly. "It's not like that at all, Day," Luther said, then turning to Plato. "You told him what I said?" "Lucky guess," Plato muttered. "You sure this is the place?" "Do you even need to ask?" D replied. Plato nodded, then turned to Luther and nodded, counting down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Luther kicked the door in. They entered swiftly, keeping a low profile with weapons raised. Dee followed, closing the door behind. Along with the dark tactical clothing, they had also applied heavy black grease paint to conceal their identities, knowing that if they were later recognized, it would mean their deaths. Both men scanned the room from its outer extremities, training their weapons towards the center. Once they were sure it was empty, they both called clear. The room was illuminated by candles, giving it a soft glow, and from what they could see, it was tastefully decorated with beautiful antique French furniture. They lowered their weapons. "So this is how the other half lives?" Luther commented. "Where's the safe?" Plato asked, ignoring Luther's comment. Dee moved to the center of the room where a small podium was located, on top of which sat a large, intricately carved jade dragon. "Is the safe in the podium?" Luther asked. Just then the door opened. Both men spun and trained their weapons onto the large figure that entered. Madame Cook's eyes went wide at the sight of the three armed men in her private quarters. Before she could raise an alarm, Luther advanced upon her, his shotgun raised. This, and the sight of his imposing figure and penetrating stare, made the robust queen of the palace think better about alerting help. Luther steered the madam to a chair, and then proceeded to strap her arms and legs down with black duct tape. A lot of black duct tape. "You're all dead," Madam Cook said in a strange mixture of fright and warning. Luther started to unravel more tape for her mouth. "That won't be necessary," she started to say, but Luther strapped it tight over her mouth, running his hand over it firmly to ensure the seal was tight. He kindly left her nostrils uncovered. "Where were we?" Luther said. "No, the safe is not in the podium," Day said, studying the dragon statue on top of it. "But the dragon knows where." Luther moved in close, looking over Day's shoulder. "What does the writing say?" "I can't quite make it out," Luther observed. "It says, 'Ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation,'" Dee recited. "What's that supposed to be from?" Luther asked. "Khalil Gibran. And you think my people are savages?" Dee said with distaste. "Then what does it mean, smart guy?" Luther replied. Dee's smug smile was short-lived. "I have no idea. Obviously it's about lost love." "Who was her beau?" Plato asked. All three men looked around the room, but Madame Cook's eyes betrayed her. Plato followed her gaze to a picture on the wall. A young sailor and a pretty young girl sitting on his lap, her face deliriously happy. Luther joined him as he stared at the picture. "Wow, she was a looker back in the day." "What happened?" Luther said. "I'm guessing it was her obsession with chocolate," Dew said, pointing to a stack of empty boxes of imported chocolates. "You have to learn not to eat your emotions," Dai said, with a smirk to the incapacitated madam. "Lost love, a sailor, the ocean. Can you lift it up?" Plato asked. Day attempted to lift the statue with no effect. "It's fixed to the podium," Day said. "I'm betting not entirely." "Try turning it?" Plato asked. Day nodded and attempted to turn the statue. It required a little effort, but sure enough, Day was able to turn the statue. "Now what?" Day asked. "Turn it so the dragon is facing east," Plato instructed. Day shrugged, but did as he was told. The dragon turned slowly, and as soon as it was facing due east, a mechanism within the podium clicked. They all gasped, except for Plato and, of course, Madame Cook. There was a brief pause. Then the large portrait of Madame Cook split open from the vertical center, revealing a large safe mounted into the wall behind it. Luther and Day turned to face Plato. "How did you know?" Luther asked. "It was simple. As I said before, lost love, a sailor," Plato said, but only received blank stares. "The sea. The sea is to the east." The other two men now nodded. "It's poetry. Beautiful. Almost," remarked Luther. "It's time for you to do your thing," Plato said to Day, who nodded and immediately went to work. The safe was a formidable construction of iron and steel with a large numerical dial and lever. Dee pulled out a doctor's stethoscope and placed it near the dial and proceeded to slowly turn it. Every so often he would write down a number into a small notebook. "How long is this going to take?" Luther asked. "Shh," Doe hissed. Luther rolled his eyes and sat down on one of the comfy chairs. "Patience is not one of my strong suits," Luther groaned. Day had been working for close to 5 minutes. Beads of sweat had started to pop out on his forehead. Plato was starting to feel anxious as well. "This is taking too long," Plato said. "I think we're nearly there," Doe said as he slowly turned the dial. An audible click sounded through the room. "That's it." Dee turned to his partners in crime and smiled confidently. He then turned the lever and the door to the safe opened. Luther and Plato moved to Dee's side to get a closer look. Inside the safe was a plainly carved statue that bore a passing resemblance to a dragon. Plato couldn't identify what type of stone had been used, but it was a dark gray in color. "Is that supposed to be Tan Vian?" Luther said, disappointed. Madame Cook started to groan loudly. "Can you see what's got her so worked up?" Plato said to Luther. "That would be me," a strong feminine voice said from behind. All three men spun to find the voice belonging to the wraith. Up close, she didn't look too formidable. A little over 5'5", she was thin in a lean, athletic way, and her face would have been quite pretty, except for the fact that she never, ever smiled. The wraith was dressed conservatively in a plain white blouse and tan 3/4 pants and matching shoes. Behind her were half a dozen armed men, not the paid security of the Jade Palace, but trained mercenaries with the hungry look of experience etched into their faces. "So who are you three? Who would be stupid enough to come all of this way to die?" Both Luther and Plato had remained still, trying to gauge their options. Luckily, Plato had thought of such a contingency. "What do you want with Tan Vian?" Plato asked in Vietnamese. "Oh, so you are actually aware of the statue," the wraith replied. "Yes, but I don't understand your interest in it. Surely you don't believe in the legend?" Plato asked. "I would have thought by your very presence that you do too," the wraith stated. "Not that it matters. Have you any last words?" Plato stood up straight and faced the female assassin and nodded. "Cajun chicken," Plato said slowly and clearly. The wraith stared back, uncomprehending. At that exact moment, a large explosion rocked the Jade Palace, knocking everyone to the floor. Luther was the first to fire, his shotgun bellowing in the confined space of the room. Plato was next, his suppressed SMG firing short, controlled bursts. Because of the explosion, their shots were only partially accurate, only able to hit a couple of the wraith's men. The others were now starting to fire back. The room was now in utter chaos, the blast having blown out most of the candles. The only light was the flashes of flame from the weapons' muzzles as they fired. Everyone was either crawling to or firing from a lying position, trying to get the upper hand in a place that defied reason and logic. "We need to get the hell out of Dodge," Luther yelled out. "I'm all over it, good buddy," Plato yelled back. "Texas chili," he yelled into his comm set, and another series of explosions rocked the brothel. "Get out!" Plato screamed as the whole room went black. Sirens could be heard in the distance. Luther was hunched against a brick wall, panting. It was dark, but he could see blood seeping from a wound on his left arm. Luther could hear footsteps approaching. He brandished his gun. A dark figure appeared from around the corner. Moments before Luther squeezed the trigger, he recognized Plato. "Next time, we need an appropriate password," Plato said, then slumped down next to him. "It's you," said Luther. "Where's Day? Did you get the statue? Are you injured? Am I injured? You ask 2 questions before you find out if I'm injured? Nice to know you care," replied Plato. "Hey, at least I asked. Remember crashing in the Malayan jungle? I thought I was holding my own kidney, and you were worried about a little fire on the left wing," responded Luther. "But you weren't holding your kidney, were you? It was your co-pilot's, wasn't it?" "What was his name?" asked Plato. "Blackie. He was one tough SOB. We would have died in that crash if he hadn't pulled that move," said Luther wistfully. "And it wasn't a little fire either. Half the plane was engulfed. I'm lucky I can cover the scarring on the back of my head by combing it over," said Plato. "So, Day hasn't shown yet?" Luther said, looking around as if the answer was obvious. "I'm thinking we're not going to be on his mother's Christmas card list this year. You don't think those explosions were a little over the top? I'm surprised any of us made it out alive. What about the Wraith?" "It worked, didn't it?" Plato said, wincing as he moved. They both spun and aimed their weapons at a figure moving towards them in the alley. "Bloody hell, mate, you'll get shot, creeping up on people like that," hissed Luther. "I felt like I had to interrupt before you 2 started reminiscing about that time you showered together," laughed Doe as he stepped into view. "Hey, did you tell him about that?" asked Plato. All 3 laughed, letting the tension drain out. "So, did you get the tan?" asked Luther. "I had it, then she—" Dee trailed off, remembering what happened. "It's okay, Dee. We were lucky to get out alive, let alone get the statue," Plato said, and slapped him on the shoulder, who winced at the contact. "I'm going to be sore for a month," he grunted. "That's about how long you're going to have to lie low as well," Luther added. Dee nodded. "I appreciate the sentiment tonight, gentlemen. I think Chi would have as well." Luther and Plato nodded back. "We'll be in touch later," Plato said. "Not that I really need to know, but what now?" Dee asked. "We're off to see a monk," Plato said with a grim expression. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quills books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.